I'm not here to tell you to buy American Eagle jeans. And I definitely won't say that this.
Hollywood just got hit with a casting drama nobody saw coming. Imagine being chosen to play a legendary star, only for that same icon to publicly say you're completely wrong for the role. Not because of your acting. Not because of your experience. But because of how you looked. That's exactly what's happening between Kim Novak and Sydney Sweeney, and the reason behind it is people seriously divided. At first, it sounds like a simple disagreement over casting. But the more you dig into it, the more it starts to feel like something deeper, something tied to image, control, and a story Hollywood has never fully told the truth about, because this isn't just about a movie. It's about a forbidden romance, powerful studio threats, and a past that some believe is now being rewritten for modern audiences. And what Kim Novak said next? It only made things more intense. The moment the casting news broke, it didn't take long for things to turn uncomfortable. Kim Novak didn't hold back. When asked about Sydney Sweeney stepping into her shoes for the film Scandalous, her reaction was immediate and brutally honest. She called the casting totally wrong. Not unexpected. Not interesting. Just wrong. And then came the comment that really set everything off when Novak pointed out that Sweeney sticks out so much above the waist, a line that many people took as a direct jab at her body. What made it even more striking was what Novak didn't say. There was no mention of acting skills, no critique of talent, no discussion about whether Sweeney could capture her personality or emotional depth. It was entirely about appearance. That single detail shifted the entire conversation. Suddenly, this wasn't just about casting, it became a debate about image, standards, and what it really takes to portray a real-life icon. Some people saw Novak's words as harsh, even unfair. Others argued she had every right to speak on how her own story is told. But either way, the tension was impossible to ignore, because when a Hollywood legend rejects a rising star this publicly, it usually means there's more going on beneath the surface, and in this case, there definitely was. But if you look past the surface-level comments, it starts to feel like Kim Novak wasn't just talking about appearance. There was something else behind her reaction, and it's what really raised eyebrows. Novak hinted that her biggest concern wasn't who was playing her, but how her story would be told. She suggested that casting Sydney Sweeney could shift the focus of the film in a direction she clearly isn't comfortable with. In her words, there's no way it wouldn't be a sexual relationship, adding that Sweeney looks sexy all the time. That statement changed everything, because now, it wasn't just about physical differences, it was about tone, perception, and the fear that a deeply personal chapter of her life could be reduced to something far more sensational. Long before this casting drama, there was a story Hollywood tried its best to keep quiet. In the late 1950s, Kim Novak found herself in a relationship that, at the time, was considered completely unacceptable by industry standards. She had fallen for Sammy Davis Jr., one of the biggest entertainers in the world, but this wasn't just a romance, it was a risk. Back then, interracial relationships weren't just frowned upon, they could end careers overnight. Studios had immense control over their stars, and image was everything. One wrong move, one controversial headline, and everything you'd built could disappear. And according to reports, that's exactly what powerful figures in Hollywood were afraid of. As the story goes, executives at Columbia Pictures, the studio Novak was signed to, stepped in fast. At the center of it all was Harry Cohn, a man known for controlling every detail of his stars' lives. Rumors suggest that Cohn wasn't just concerned, he was furious. What makes this story even more unsettling is the level of control Hollywood had behind the scenes. During that era, studios didn't just manage careers, they controlled lives. Actors were tied to contracts that dictated everything from the roles they took to who they were seen with in public. And for someone like Kim Novak, being one of the biggest stars under Columbia Pictures, that pressure was on another level. The center of it all was Harry Cohn, a man known for his strict, no-compromise approach. Reports from that time suggest he was determined to maintain a very specific image for Novak, one that aligned with what Hollywood and society expected. And when her relationship with Sammy Davis Jr. became known behind closed doors, everything changed. It's been said that intense pressure was applied to shut it down immediately. Some stories even claim that the situation escalated beyond simple warnings, with whispers of intimidation tactics being used to ensure the relationship ended quickly. These accounts have never been fully confirmed, but they've lingered for decades, adding a darker layer to what already feels like a controlled narrative. And this is where things start to feel less like a love story, and more like a power struggle, because if those reports hold any truth, then Novak wasn't just making a personal decision, she was navigating a system where saying no wasn't really an option. That kind of pressure leaves a mark. It shapes how stories are remembered, how they're told. and sometimes, how they're protected years later, which brings us right back to today, because when Novak pushes back against this film, some believe she's not just criticizing casting, she might be trying to prevent her past from being turned into something she no longer recognizes, and that makes what's happening now feel a lot less like simple Hollywood drama, and a lot more like history trying to defend itself. While all of this was unfolding, Sydney Sweeney was looking at the situation from a completely different angle. For her, this wasn't controversy, it was opportunity. Before any of these comments surfaced, Sweeney had openly shared how excited she was to take on the role of Kim Novak. She saw it as a chance to step into the life of a Hollywood legend and bring a complex, lesser-known story to a new generation. In fact, she even mentioned wanting to meet Novak herself, to understand her better, to hear the story directly from the source. But now, that moment feels a lot more complicated, because instead of support, she's been met with very public rejection. And what makes it even more intense is the nature of that rejection. It wasn't about her skills, her dedication, or her ability to transform into a character. It was about how she looks, and what people assume that means for the story. As soon as Novak's comments went public, the internet did what it always does, it exploded. Fans quickly split into two sides, and the debate got intense fast. On one hand, many people defended Kim Novak, arguing that if anyone has the right to speak on how her story is told, it's her. To them, this wasn't criticism, it was protection. A Hollywood icon trying to make sure her past isn't reshaped into something unrecognizable. But on the other side, supporters of Sydney Sweeney saw things very differently. They pointed out that acting is about transformation. That physical differences shouldn't define whether someone can portray a real person. And more importantly, many felt the comments crossed a line, shifting the conversation away from talent and straight into appearance. And when you step back and look at everything, this situation feels like more than just a casting disagreement, it's a clash between two very different versions of Hollywood. On one side, you have Kim Novak, a star shaped by an era where studios controlled narratives, images were protected at all costs, and certain stories were never meant to be told openly. For her, this isn't just a film. It's a deeply personal chapter, one that carries memories, pressure, and possibly things the public never fully understood. On the other side is Sydney Sweeney, part of a new generation that thrives on bold storytelling, where raw, complicated, and even controversial stories are brought to the surface instead of being hidden. And somewhere in the middle is the truth. A story about love, pressure, and power involving Sammy Davis Jr. that may never be told exactly the way it happened, because the real question isn't just who should play the role, it's who gets to define the story. Is it the person who lived it, or the generation trying to reinterpret it? And maybe that's why this debate feels so intense, because it's not just about the past, it's about who controls the narrative moving forward. And as this film gets closer to becoming reality, one thing is certain: no matter what happens next, people will be watching.